Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for 1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. And today on Top Global Startups, it's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Bennington. And we're going to be talking about Q5D and his way that he's changing the world through wiring automation. With that, I'd like to bring Stephen on board. Hi, Stephen. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Well, you got a wide background: hydrogen technologies, battery innovation, cutting edge nanotechnologies. What made you decide to get into engineering?
Well, I mean, I was originally my first business was much more on the kind of chemistry and physics side, the hydrogen storage
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I was an academic prior to that for a long period of time, but I fancied doing something a little bit more exciting.
Well,
Um,
that's exactly right. Can you share what your journey's like from academia,
yeah, sure,
leading
sure.
high tech companies? What that's a can be a quantum leap. How is it for you?
It was exciting. I mean, I love being an academic, and it's a really interesting life, but um, it is kind of emotionally flat. Whereas when you're running a business, it's much more. You've got to live on your wits. You've got 1 minute you're up, 1 minute you're down. It's a much more exciting life, and I think I just craved that. So I think that's why I decided to step out of academia. I worked at a big government lab. If you're in the US, you probably know places like Argonne National Lab. This is the UK's version of that. Holds all the large scale national infrastructure. So I used to help build that stuff and then run it for the international community. And I was a prof at University College London. And there we were developing new hydrogen storage materials, novel carbons, all those kinds of things. And the other reason I wanted to step out was you come up with all these great ideas, but at some point it doesn't go anywhere. A
Well,
few
that's
people on
it.
the paper.
There's a lot of ideas that are out
Exactly.
there that could make our world a better place, right?
Exactly. But
And
if you don't, nobody else is going to pick it up. If you think it's going to be useful for the world, then ultimately you've just got to go there and do it yourself. So it's all those emotional things, plus just I fancied just trying to make something happen rather than just sort of sitting back and hoping somebody picks up some of the ideas that I was having. And so yeah, 16 years ago, I set up my first startup, and that was a wild ride, huge amounts to learn, coming from a completely different background. And I have to say I don't regret any of it. I've enjoyed every minute of this journey. I say enjoyed in the kind of my daughter has this idea of type 2 fun. So type 1 fun is the kind of stuff that you enjoy while you're doing it. Type 2 fun is not enjoyable whilst you're doing it, but you can tell people afterwards, and that's fun. So
there you go.
it's type 2 fun, but still you've got those stories, haven't you? It's part of a rich life. So no, it
Well,
was
it's definitely not boring, right? And
yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so for you said 16 years ago you got involved. How's your leadership style evolved over the 16 years? How have you changed?
Um, So I've always had a sort of a kind of a mentoring style. I hope that idea of trying to bring people through. Um, I think in business you do have to be. I wouldn't say ruthless, but you have to make hard decisions. You have to have an ability to make. Nobody's got tenure in a business, and if things aren't working, things aren't working. And so there has to be some level of firmness in the way that you make decisions. So I guess that toughening up had to happen because that's not necessary in an academic career in any sense. Whereas in business, it is. Sometimes things aren't working. You just have to make that decision and move on. So I think I still have the similar sort of core style in that kind of mentoring, bringing people on, creating a high functioning team, which is what you need, a cohesive team. But then you do need that level of distance and firmness underneath. I mean, your first business is of course your first love, and that's a painful process. And your second business, you go in with a much sharper eye, I think, and much more focus about what you're actually trying to
And a
do.
sharper pencil too, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
I understand that. I've been doing startups for
Mm,
40 years in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
and you go down through and you learn. And by the way, you can't, some of the, and I'm sure you feel the same way. A lot of what you learn when you build a business, you can't learn in getting an MBA, because it's in fact it's diametrically opposed, right? Things like risk, managing risk at the kind of level you have to manage it in a startup. You're trying to figure out, are you going to make payroll or not, and what do you
Yeah.
have to do to make payroll, right?
Yeah.
And what if you have to pivot? So all those things you're going down through, and that's like a daily basis, right? Trying to figure out how you're running things. Now that's great. So, what specific problems does Q5D solve in wiring harness production, and why is this evolutionary?
Well, wiring harness is all made by hand. So it's one of those parts of the manufacturing process that's still entirely manual, or almost entirely manual. And because of that, it's usually done in a low wage economy, somewhere distant. So in America, a lot of your wiring harnesses for the automotive industry will come from Mexico. In Europe, it used to be done in the Ukraine, but that's all been shipped out now after the Ukraine war. Not all of it, but most of it. It's now had to move rapidly to North Africa. And even in Asia, it's moving as well. So all the Japanese and Korean wiring harness manufacturers, they moved to China, and now they're moving out of China because China is no longer a low-wage economy, and into the Philippines and Vietnam and places like that.
Interesting.
So
Yeah, and we always try to find a place where we can maximize the human resources and keep the same quality. And sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't. Right.
that's exactly right. But the problem is the supply chain. And supply chains have been appalling over the last few years. I mean, obviously there was COVID, the Ukraine war is an example. And even now, there's always that, you never quite know what's going to happen with tariffs. And that spooked the American automotive sector hugely. So everyone's always worried about their supply chains. It's one of those parts of the manufacturing process where they've never really managed to do just-in-time manufacturing, because they have this kind of these complex supply chains and difficult ordering processes. So the answer is automation. If you can automate these processes, if you can use robotics and complex software to be able to make those wiring harnesses, then you can bring it and do it wherever you like. You can do it, next to the OEMs. They can do just-in-time manufacturing. They can pull the wiring harnesses through like they would do all the other components of the vehicle or the aircraft or whatever you're making. And there is this kind of strong pull now in America and in Europe and certain parts of Asia to have a sovereign manufacturing capability. That idea that some
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's interesting because whenever you get into, when we have instability in the world, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, during World War II, right? Lots of stuff happened, and it's kind of interesting to see how the political winds are shifting and moving into different environments. People are afraid, right? They don't want to, in case something does happen, what are we going to do?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so the big OEMs, the big car companies, are all looking to see if they can. They're also afraid about BYD. This big Chinese car manufacturer, they vertically integrated. So obviously they make their own battery packs, but they also have just brought in-house all of their wiring manufacture. I mean, they're doing it in conventional ways, but it's under their control. And so all the other car manufacturers, General Motors and Toyota and people like that, are looking at that and saying, well, we've got to look at that too. We've got to think about ways we can do that. And so they're looking at automation. And so we're in the right place at the right time, just by chance, really. They're all thinking about how do they take control of their costs, how do they take control of their supply chains, so that they compete with the Chinese manufacturers, because that's the next big thing.
Well, I mean, the China, I have just on e-bikes, I have a fleet of e-bikes, and my European e-bikes, Gazelle, I paid $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for them, and I can buy a Chinese bike, right, for $1,300.
It's astonishing,
And
isn't it?
I mean, it's just crazy. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, I don't mind having, paying a little bit more, but that's a lot more. And so I saw BYDs when I was in the Philippines and Thailand. And so it's, they're not bad looking cars. I don't know. I don't know if you have those in the UK yet, but
we do, yeah. So I mean, they have a lot of brands, of course, and some of the brands like the Seal are beautiful, beautiful cars. I mean, they're in the technology, they're right up there now. So yeah, they're serious competitors. And the way that they've integrated, I mean, who knows what kind of subsidies they've got? I don't really understand all that part of it, but they're able to produce cars incredibly quickly and move through their design cycle at a phenomenally fast rate. So this is the challenge that the automotive industry has, and they're looking for ways to reduce cost, which is kind of what automation does, and just be a bit more in control of their supply chains. But what's interesting from our perspective is that our customers are spread between the OEMs, the manufacturers, whether that's a manufacturer of a refrigerator or a drone or a car, and the tier one suppliers of wiring harnesses. So those tier one suppliers are not small companies. Sumitomo Electric and Yazaki, these are huge businesses. And they have to ask themselves, if the OEMs are going to bring that in-house, what are they going to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a
That's
potential
exactly
existential crisis for them.
where are we going to go? So tell me a little bit about Q5D's 5-axis robotic system and how that's going to transform, how that impacts traditional wiring methods. I know we talked about it a little bit, but how fast can you do a wiring harness when you use this 5-axis robotic tool system compared to traditional, because you're doing it by hand, right? What's the speed difference?
It can be very high. I mean, you've got to remember this is a kind of piece of string question, really. How many bits of wire have you got? But typically, we take out about.
I'm taking average to average, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll give you an example, right? So we work a lot on roof linings. So I'm sure you've got a really nice SUV. Above your head, there'll be hundreds of yards, meters, whichever unit you want to use, of wire up there, all put in there by hand. And so we are automating that process. So we're doing it with some of the companies like Jaguar Land Rover, and then some of the other bigger companies we're starting to make prototypes of those roof linings. So for a typical one, for a luxury SUV, we can take the cost from, say, of the bill of materials just for the wire and the labor costs from about $18 down to about $12 to $13. We can make on one machine, we can make about 140,000 a year. It's that kind of scale you're talking about. So you're talking about a dramatic reduction in cost. And remember, the wiring harness businesses work on margins of 8%. It's tiny, whereas this gives them the opportunity to work on much higher margins. Even at our machines are not cheap, but it has that ability to reduce that cost and produce at high volume. They're fast machines, and the way it does it is that we do two things. So one, we can make something like a traditional wiring harness. So normally you on a traditional wiring harness, these are made by people on these huge pin boards, which are 3 yards across, two yards high. They string up all the wires and put all the plugs and terminations on the end, and then it's shipped off to the OEM. We do it differently. We do it on a flat. The machine comes down, it lays out all the wires for you, it does all the terminations, all in an automated way to create something which is a bit like a normal wiring harness. If you want to do it really well, then you put it directly onto a component. So you take a car bumper, you take a roof lining, you take a door panel, and you put the wires directly out. You glue them down, or you find some other way to stick them directly down on the surface. So our 5-axis machine can follow the contours of a component, lay down the wires, lay down glues to hold it in place, and then do all the terminations and plugs wherever you need them. So that means that's a fully automated process. So in other words, when you come to install that component in your vehicle, it's got all the wiring in place. You've taken out pretty much all the people in that supply chain. So labor productivity goes up hugely.
Wow, that's fantastic. So what challenges did you face while automating processes previously done manually? Because people don't want to change, right? How do you go down through and deal with that? Then you also have the issue with, replacing people that are doing a job. What happens to them? So how do you, it's not like you can do it and it's going to change. How do you politically go in Germany, for instance, and tell them you're going to do this, that's going to change everything, and you're going to reduce your workforce by, to 20% of what it was for this harness thing, right? Or whatever that is, but a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's an interesting conundrum, isn't it? There's this kind of automation thing. So I'll cover it from two different angles. So one is that most of these wiring harnesses, of course, not made in Germany. the German wiring harnesses are made in Morocco or Egypt. So for Germany, that's the OEMs, that's BMW and VW and companies like that. For them, it's an increase in the number of people that they'll be employing within Germany because they'll need a few people to man the machines. So the impact is on that other economy. So that's where they're the ones that will have to cope with that. And you're right, for the wiring harness companies, that's an absolutely huge cultural and business plan change, which who knows if they're up for coping with it. It's a really difficult problem. For the Western economies, like certainly the UK, we've not really seen any productivity gains now for 10, maybe even 20 years. And that's problematic. So we have an aging population. We're trying to support that aging population so that, with pensions and healthcare, with a productivity that's not improving at all. So if you want to, try and draw more taxes out so that you can actually support the lifestyles of people and pay the social securities of people, then you need to improve productivity. AI is one way you can do that, and the other way is robotics. So each worker in a Western economy to support an aging population has to be more productive. And so it's almost imperative that we do this if we want to actually survive and keep living standards where they are now.
Yeah, no, and that's a concern, right? People think sometimes they're sliding backwards. And the other thing is there's a disparity between the rich and the poor. It's getting wider because, AI does give you superpowers. If you know how to harness it, you can do a lot of things with it, a lot.
Yeah.
And it's going to change everything.
Exactly. It makes each worker. I'm not of the opinion that you're actually, well, you might be getting rid of people, but each worker can become incredibly more productive if they use AI as part of their daily routine.
If they master it.
We try and do that at our place. Yeah, yeah. So I think those robotics and AI are going to be absolutely crucial if we want to sort of maintain living standards when our population is aging. But you're right, it does have an impact, and that impact, I would argue that, it displaces jobs. So it's painful for the people involved, but ultimately, as the economy grows, there are always more jobs as you automate. They're just not jobs that you've seen before. You know what I mean? So in the days going way back in the UK when they were, automating the manufacture of textiles, then suddenly there was just more wealth around, and so other jobs then just turned up. So ultimately, the economy grows, and there are more better paid jobs there. They're just not the ones that you had before. So the transition's painful.
Yeah, no, and that's going to be interesting how we face that. Which
Yeah.
industry sectors are adopting automation technology most rapidly, and why are they doing it?
So we work in three sectors. So one is the automotive sector, the transport sector, of course, and they're heavily engaged. So I think most of our contracts, we're still an early stage company, so we're I wouldn't say we've changed everything yet. We're still at the early stage of the ramp. But they're the ones that are engaging fast, both the tier ones and the OEMs. We work in the defense sector. So one of our biggest investors is Lockheed Martin, and they're interested for also a supply chain reason. The aging population means that all the mom and pop shops where they buy their wiring harnesses from across the US are all folding. They can't buy it from Mexico. They're not allowed to. They have to buy from wiring harnesses within the US, and people don't want to do these jobs. It's too low paid, and the businesses are going bust. So they're worried about their supply chain, but they're also interested in the kind of additional functionality of being able to, say, make a drone on a forward base, and that forward base could be an aircraft carrier, or it could be a base out in the Middle East. But mass manufacturing things like that in a forward base is of great excitement for them. And then the last sector is consumer and industrial electricals, so refrigerators and washing machines and things like that. And so that's the one that we're only just starting on. The other two we've been working on for a couple of years. The last sector is just picking up now. They don't really have R&D budgets, so they like a slightly more mature technology, so they're dropping in a bit later. But we have a suspicion they'll race through the process a bit more quickly than the other two sectors. We think they'll probably get into using our machines in full production more quickly than the other two, because the risk is low. A washing machine fails, that's a couple $100. If your car fails because of the wiring, that's a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I had it happen to me one time.
Really?
I actually got a Volkswagen that had very few miles on it, less than 5,000 miles. And it turns out that there was a problem with there was a beetle. There was a number of years ago, back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and it was a wiring harness problem. What I didn't realize is that sometimes some of the warranties don't cover wiring harnesses,
Oh, really?
computer systems, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so it was like going around and around and around. Uh, and I just finally traded it. I just didn't want to get into it
Some other
because
force
I
out.
figured this is not, there's nothing good going to happen with this thing. Nothing good. And I love Volkswagens. Anyhow, so um, how does a global supply chain disruption and tariffs, how are they impacting the demand for automation? Are they
Um,
positively? Do you see a big
Very
uptick
positively,
now?
very positively, yeah. So I mean, the tariffs, for example, it may never happen, but just the threat of it has got certainly the US automotive industry really quite worried, and so we're getting strong engagement there. Um, and I think that, well, if you during the Ukraine war, that Ukraine war followed by COVID, and in conjunction with, if you remember, the chip crisis where nobody could buy chips,
Yeah.
that almost killed off the European automotive market for a year. They barely made a car in a year, a car in that whole year. So that has scarred the industry, and they really don't want to go there again. So the idea of being able to onshore and take control of their own supply chains is something that the C-suite of all those companies are really quite focused on. As you point out rightly, it gets more complicated as you move down the management chain into production. In production, it works already. Why do we need something new? And so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a completely different sell. But certainly at the C-suite, we have no problems at all, engaging with them, which is interesting.
Um, so what competitive advantage do you have, does Q5D have, compared to traditional wiring harness providers? So, time to market, right? You can make things a lot faster. How much faster if you bench average to average, how much faster is it? How much of an increase? Is it 5 times, 10 times, 100 times?
It's more than 5 to 10 times, but it's the cost we always focus on. So the idea that you can reduce costs by 40 to 50% is dramatic in a business where the margins are already
Mhm.
so low. So
What
I think
quality? How much better is the qualities?
exactly the first wiring harness and your millionth wiring harness is the same. If the recruitment is often a huge problem here, even in these so-called low-wage economies. These are not exciting jobs. These are really repetitive, low-paid jobs, and people don't stay. So there's always a recruitment problem. There's always a retention problem. You're
Mhm.
always training somebody. The failure rates that are reported in some of these places, particularly when they first set them up, is shocking. And to your point, the most likely point of failure in any product, whether that's a washing machine or a car, is always the wiring harness. It's because it's manually made. It's because it is so complex, and there are so many things that could potentially go wrong with it. That's the cause of the vast majority of faults in those products. So quality is something that's really quite important, and that idea that you're doing something robotically. So if you make the first one correct, then in principle everyone after that is identical. So yeah, the quality part is really quite important.
So recently, you've secured significant funding and from Lockheed Martin. So what was it? How did you attract those investors? What was the thing that they were interested in? And how do you go about finding the investors? We have a lot. We have we've had about 1.3 million views of my show, and we've done about 1,400 podcasts now. So people are all over. They're curious. What does it take when you go down through to attract an investor like a Lockheed? How do you get to them at a show? Do you use your contacts from the university? How do you get to them, and how do you convince them that you're the right group to invest in?
It just takes a lot of time and effort. I mean, we kind of structure the business. We have a very, very experienced team, and so it's a bit different from a normal startup. We've employed the other founder, myself, Chris, and myself. We've employed very high quality people with lots of experience, and so that means I can focus a lot of my time on the fundraising, and it does take a good fraction of my time. And I go through other investors. So I don't SOSV Hacks was our first pre-seed investor. they're absolutely amazing at making introductions. And then Chrysalix, which was my second investor, it's a North American investor as well. They're just brilliant. So leveraging your existing investors, creating that long list of 300 investors, trying to find the route through to get to them all, is just an enormous amount of work. And the hit rate's low, particularly for a manufacturing business like us. We're not an AI or a SaaS business, which were all the rage way back. You just have to keep at it and slog away. But leveraging those contacts you have through existing investors, and to get to these other investors, and that after a while, even if they don't invest, you often get quite a lot of goodwill from venture capital investors. So they say, well, you're not fit for us, but I know these other people that really would like to talk to you, and that's
that's what it's all about. It's about networking contacts, right?
Exactly.
I spend a bit of my time out in Palo Alto. In fact, I started my company in Menlo Park, Eva and Findo, and also GSD. And so one of the things is that, it's like fishing. You got to go where the fish are. And the problem is, people say with Silicon Valley in particular, they don't get that, still about half the money in the world is either there or comes there. It's just they're there and they get it.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about wiring harness electric cars, they understand because they've invested in Tesla, right? And they've invested in these companies, and maybe WeYD. They have invested. They know it from the inside out. And the thing is, what happens in cases. I know when I was in the UK, I tried to raise money for my company. I went around and around for months.
It's hard.
Then I came back to Silicon Valley and we raised about $6 million in a very short period of time, less than 2 months.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why is that? And the thing is, they got it. The problem is they understood it deeply, what the problem was and what we would solve, right? So it's just interesting. And, Silicon Valley is truly a port to the rest of the world, right? Companies.
I really like the American investors because they are usually operators. They're people who run their own businesses, and they really understand it both technically and as a business. And it's a much easier conversation. This is exactly what you're saying. It's a much easier conversation with an American investor. Usually, I don't want to diss the UK market. It's a good market, but a lot of people come from the financial sector and they come at it from a completely different viewpoint.
And a lot of the VCs have degrees in finance and have never been operators. I don't know if you know this, but only somewhere between 10 and 20% of VCs, just in general, have ever operated. That's it, because they have these from top tier universities and their finance degrees. Exactly what you said. Well, guess what? Building a company is not about that. It's just like you said. It's networking contacts, operational expertise, and access to capital. And if you have those three in a resilient team, any company can become a unicorn because you can pivot to success. Yeah. We talk about pivoting. Nobody ever talks about where you can pivot to. They just say pivot. Well, what is that? Like putting the blinders on? It's not like that. If you've run companies, you know where to pivot.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the ideas that we had about where this technology was going to go when we started 5 years ago to where we're focused now is completely different. And finding those beachheads into each of those sectors where it's big enough and it's technically a good match, and those companies are willing to adopt. Finding those beachheads is really crucial. And then when it's not quite right, flipping to the next beachhead, trying something else. It's really
no, what you're doing is
it's risk management. It's understanding the risk, isn't it? And whereas in a finance background, you're always trying to work on think about the downside rather than working on the upside.
So what's your advice to tech entrepreneurs seeking venture capital or government grants? What would you say to them right now? Those startups coming out, just like yourself, that are going out and raising money. They've come from academia. They've done it. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, it's not easy. I think is the thing. Don't expect people. I think try and understand the venture capital business. So that if you can really get into the mindset of how venture capital make their money, because it's a partnership. There's a kind of a thing of an expectation. These people don't, the venture capital people don't get it. They do get it, They have their own business model, and you have to dig into exactly what that company's business model is, and try and find that match, and then work with them as a partnership throughout the lifetime of your business, because you're both making money out of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And sometimes we forget about that. And you got to make sure you get the right investor, because sometimes they think
Yes.
more about the management fees and things than they do about,
Yes.
about really taking care of the business. So you got to make sure you get with the right partner that's going to help you grow your business, right?
Exactly.
That's part of it.
I think that's the crucial thing, and that's the mistake I made in my first business. The expectations of the people who invested in the business were not my expectations. We were poles apart in what we wanted. This time I've been really, really careful at selecting people, and also being really transparent with them about what I wanted to get out of this, just to make sure that we're in full alignment. And I talk to them all the time. So, I've had calls this morning with some of my investors just to keep them updated with what's going on. Talk to them all the time. You're a partnership. You've really got to get on with them, and you've got to make sure that there's no. It's quite easy to. It's like a marriage. If you don't,
Exactly.
these silly misunderstandings that can grow and fester if you don't actually, have those honest conversations all the time. If things are going wrong, tell them, and then you can bring them on that journey rather than waiting for it to get critical and then telling them, and then it's like a massive hammer blow. You've got that transparency, and that partnership has got to be. For me anyway, that's the way I like to work with the investors, just to make sure that we're all working. It is a team. You're trying to make money out of this, and they often, if they are operators, they've got massive experience you can draw on.
Yeah, no, you got to know how to use it, right? It's like use the tools. Listen, we're coming up to the top of the show. We're a couple minutes over right now, but the closing thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
Closing thoughts. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. Closing thoughts is, I don't know who your audience is, but if they're people who are thinking about going into being an entrepreneur, it's a fantastic ride. But you do need that resilience. You need that internal toughness so that you can ride out the bad times and not show it. You've got to keep that calm exterior for your for the rest of your management team and your investors. Even though it might be eating you away inside, you've got to have that internal toughness. But it is a fantastic ride. Really enjoying it.
And how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way? LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn. Yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn. That's by far and away the easiest way to do it.
All right, sounds great. And if you want to stay on after the show, we can speak for a few minutes. To all the audience out there, thank you for joining one more time. GSD Presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back again soon with another exciting edition. Thank you, Stephen, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Gary.